Some languages like Java have been around for over 30 years. Others like Rust and Go are maybe a bit more exciting. So today in the future of tech, we're talking about emerging languages and how they really have changed the way that people program. So I'm your host, Ray Villalobos, a software engineer and senior staff instructor at LinkedIn Learning. And I'm here today with LinkedIn Learning instructors Adelina Simion as a technology evangelist at Form3 and Marcus Willock, a senior software engineer at Looking Glass. Hello, everyone. How's it going?
Doing well, doing well.
All
Hey
right.
Ray, excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super happy. This is going to be awesome. And before we get started, though, let's take care of some things. First, this is part four of a five-part series that we're doing this week on the future of code. And on Monday, we got started talking about the future of databases. Tuesday, we covered legacy languages like Java and Python. So today's show actually pairs really well with that. Let's see, actually, yeah, on Wednesday we covered actually the legacy languages like Java, which pairs well actually. And then yesterday we talked about machine learning and data science, whether or not they're taking your job. And you can go to the link in the red there if you want to watch any of these past episodes. And today we're talking about Go and Rust, but then generally speaking, just newer languages and what impact they're having in the industry. And then tomorrow we end up the week with what's probably the thing that I am most familiar with, which is the web. So we're taking questions from the audience, which we'll get to a little bit later in the show. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, to make this interactive, I'm getting started with a poll, and the poll for this week already has more than 300 votes. So go check that out, and you can see the link in red as well right there. The question today is which one of these emerging languages will succeed over their maybe original legacy language or just legacy languages overall. So what do you guys think about this question and some of these answers?
I
Obviously,
see
I
it.
love that Go one.
Say what? Oh, you're really excited about Go be number one? Yeah, good thing.
So I see a check mark on Rust. Does that
Uh-oh.
mean you picked Rust?
Oh, what? What? Yes, I did.
I think we already won then.
There you go. A little bit, I think the Go, like, I don't know. I think, one thing about Go is that if you are like a blogger, it has the fastest like blogging platform, and it just kills everything else. We haven't seen a Rust-based one yet, but all of the platforms, like every single framework, is being rewritten in Rust just because it's so fast and interesting, something that's really sort of taken over the web sort of platform. So Go, it has a lot of love, and I think Adelina's going to tell us about it more today. But it just hasn't had the effect that and the acceleration that I think Rust. That's a very well played, Marcus. I feel like you got me. You got me because I forgot that it does show this check mark. Nothing against you, Adelina. I think highly of Go as well. So let's talk a little bit maybe about the past of these languages. You guys talk about Adelina. Talk a little bit about how, the history of Go. How was it born, and why do people feel like it's something that works really well in some instances?
Yeah, so the history of how Go was kind of designed and how it came to be is quite well known in the Go community. So basically, Google was scaling at a very fast pace, and they are having a hard time like scaling their code bases and some of their infrastructure. So they decided, you know what, we need better tools. They already had like the best talent in the industry, right? So they just needed better tools, and they designed Go in 2007 with trying to put together some of the best aspects of a few languages. So they wanted the performance and the speed of C, and the simplicity and readability of Python. So, with that in mind, they designed it, and it was announced in 2009. So, in November 2009, so actually, this November, Go became a teenager.
What?
So it's been around for 13 years. Yeah.
Well, so
So
not as young. I mean, I know Rust probably is not going to be as old, but not as young. I mean, not exactly like a baby language. That's still teenagers. So wow, that's crazy.
it was released to the general public in 2012, but it was like announced in its form in 2009. So yeah, that's quite interesting. Also, it highlights to me how old I am because I constantly forget that it's 2022. Um,
That's right. Yeah, I have been around a lot longer than you. Not quite to the punch cards, but I was there with the tape drives. So it's kind of shocking to sort of have been in the industry for a while and have experienced like the growth of these things, like when they
yeah.
were a thing. So how long ago did you get into Go? Was it like a long time ago, or was it something more recent for you?
So I learned Go in 2018
Hmm.
when I worked on a team that was converting a legacy service from Ruby on Rails to Go. So I learned Go because just out of this need, and I before that I wrote Java, and I just learned Go on the team with people that were that had experience writing Go already.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of really really good resources out there, and even more now, so it was really easy to pick up, and it was quite relatively quick for me to become productive with Go. But yeah, it was born out of the need for something readable and fast.
Yeah, and that's probably how a lot of things are born. Also, really interesting that you kind of picked it up and out of a need as well. Like it was a need
Yeah.
to do work on a project. That's probably a lot of times how people learn. Like when you have some sort of like hard goal or deadline. So tell us a little bit about Marcus, the history of Rust, because it's just blown up so fast, so quickly. Where did it come from?
Okay. So one of the things about Rust that might shock people is that Go and Rust were announced relatively at the same time.
Oh,
So as Adelina just mentioned, Go was announced in 2009, Rust was announced in 2010. So in terms of age, they're about
hmm,
the same. Like Go is a little bit older, but in terms of like its history, right? It was a passion project from somebody that worked at Mozilla from, let's say, like 2006. I think it started as a passion project, and then it got sponsored by Mozilla, and it was used at Mozilla for their Servo project, which I believe was the experimental like underlying engine for the Firefox web browser. Um, and then like in terms of how Go or how Rust got into the mind share of a lot of people, I think that came around the start of COVID because there was the Mozilla layoffs, which was very unfortunate. But because a lot of the Rust team and people that were working on Rust got laid off and the server project got dismantled, it was at that point in time where the companies that uh, are invested in Rust's future came to the forefront and told the general public that they're invested. And they did that by coming in and supporting the Rust Foundation. So we have like AWS, Google, Huawei, Microsoft, and Mozilla, right? And is at that point in time, I think that the general public got a idea that Rust is well doing well and also has a future in a lot of these companies and in our industry.
that is so interesting. I really had no idea. I didn't really look that up, so I'm glad you gave us that perspective. I didn't know they were that close to each other. That's pretty amazing. So, yeah, I mean, what do you think? So then, how sort of do you compare it to something with a lot more history, like Java? Do you think how does it compare, and maybe why do people still go to something that is legacy, Marcus?
Oh, so in my mind, I think the reason why people still go to things that are legacy is for two reasons: mind share and legacy code. So as a company, right? If I have a bunch of code written in a language, then I need to hire people to maintain that language. So there's a demand there. So we need people that know this language. And then in terms of mind share, when you think about Java, Java was the number one language taught in schools for a very, very long time. So if I went into school when I said I wanted to become a software developer, I would be taught Java, and a lot of people just accept that as their default language going forward because that's the best language they're good at. So they get jobs in it, and they know there's a demand for it. So it kind of just feeds the cycle of supply and demand. There's the
Hmm.
demand for the companies to have people to work on these work in these languages, and then there's the supply that the schools are pushing out of people who know these languages.
That's super interesting. I wonder why you think it kind of like it took so long to like just get on fire like it's been recently. Like maybe do you think something specifically kind of caused that acceleration in usage? I know recently we've seen like all the frameworks, at least do some of the sort of engine part of the processing part, and instead of going to Go, they actually went to something like Rust. You have any insights on why that's happened? Hmm.
Oh, in my opinion, it might be due to from my understanding, Go has a garbage collector, right? So you still have to have a runtime when you run Go. But when you run Rust, you don't necessarily have to have that. So there's like less of a cost in terms of performance, at least in that regard. And it opens itself to areas that, let's say, Go isn't like prevalent in because it has a garbage collector.
Hmm.
So when you have to choose between Go and Rust, sometimes that's just like the definitive line.
That's super interesting. So, Adelina, when you said you made a transition from another language, uh, what maybe talk a little bit about what you found like super interesting when you were trying it out, and maybe a little bit frustrating. Like, was there some things that you had a hard time with, and some things that you were like, wow, this is clearly better than what I was doing before? Yeah, maybe some of that would be really insightful.
Yeah, so I would say one thing that these emerging languages don't have is a large array of material, like academic material that you could actually go and use in schools. So now that's been addressed, but I think it's one of the reasons why we see still the traditional languages being taught in schools. It's really hard to produce like academic level material to teach complete newcomers.
Mm.
Um, I converted from Java, and there's a joke in the Go community saying like if you write Go like Java, you're gonna have a bad time. So it does require a little bit of a paradigm shift
Mhm.
in the way they first off you do error handling.
Mhm.
So there's no exceptions. Go has explicit error handling, in which you return an extra return value. Go has multiple returns, so you return the error alongside whatever happy path there is. And it seemed verbose when I first started writing, because in the majority of cases you're going to go down the happy path, like let's say, unless you're in an incident, right, like 90% of your requests are supposed to like go down the happy path. So now all of a sudden you have to write the code for that extra 10%. um, but once you get into the mindset of actually thinking about your errors and all of your execution paths, it actually becomes, exactly what your code is going to do in the case of this devastating incident, right? So that was one thing that I had to think about more. And then, of course, the concurrency aspect, which is very special in Go. It has Go routines and channels. And it was something that I had to really like think about. And in Java, you wouldn't just casually write a Go route. You wouldn't casually like go multi-threaded because you have to write a whole bunch of code, and you'd only do it if you really had to. But in Go, you can just spin up a Go routine and write asynchronous code. So that was something that I also had to get used to when I was writing Go.
How was your experience like after that first initial project? Did you continue working on Go, or did it take a while maybe for everybody to ramp into it? Like, how was that transition? Is that a transition that you made permanently, or is it just for that project and you went back to Java? How did that work out?
No, so once I became a golfer, I wanted to work in a fully Go code base. And a
Wow.
lot of people feel like that because we see it like as a language of the future. And as I said, it wasn't one of these kinds of conversion projects where you kind of like strangle the monolith and write a little Go microservice is actually something that happens at a variety of companies. So there are more and more roles out there where you'll encounter a kind of like polyglot architecture,
Hmm.
where perhaps one of the microservices that has to be really performant is written in Go, but you don't want to like rewrite the whole code base in Go.
Wow. So was that a sort of a company-wide switch that everybody just switched immediately to Go during and after that project, or were you like, I'm not going back. You guys can, anybody that wants to go back to Java, you can have it. Were you like a holdout now from then on, or how did that work out?
Yeah, so from then on, I didn't want to work on anything other than Go for sure. um, but yeah, obviously, I do think that Java has its merits because
Mhm.
it's been battle tested for so long. And a lot of the new features have actually made it really nice to use from Java 8 onwards,
Mhm.
where they have lambdas and other cool, like functional aspects.
You're being so
Um,
nice. You probably have some
yeah,
Java friends that you have to
I
be
mean,
nice to.
there's
Yes.
innovation everywhere,
Yes.
right?
Talk a little bit about the same thing to you, Marcus. How did you encounter Rust? Was it a project that you had to do? Like, was it just your desire to learn something new? Was it a company-driven thing? I mean, what drove you to that language? And then what was your experience with something like Adelina's that she got on a project, she had to use it, and then like I'm never going back. Talk a little bit about maybe your path.
Okay. So my Rust path began with me wanting to learn the language, right? Um, and then once I was learning the language, I thought that this language would be great for my wife who she works at Princeton, but she works with like microcontrollers. And
Hmm.
given that Rust could connect directly to a microcontroller, I thought this might be a great language for her to learn. But she is not a software developer. She does not have that kind of background. So, in order to promote her learning, I went on YouTube and created a YouTube channel where I read the entire Rust book. So, after I read the book for myself, learned the basics of Rust, I went back and reread that entire book online and recorded it. And then through that process, because that process took nearly a year, right? Um, Other people started watching my videos and learning from my videos. And then, like after I finished going through the Rust book, I then started making other videos to help people learn about other aspects of Rust, and it kind of just snowballed from there. Uh,
So hold on a second. You read the Go manual like on YouTube, like cover to
uh,
cover, just read the whole
the
thing?
Rust one, yeah, yeah, I
Oh,
read
I mean, yeah,
from
yeah.
cover to cover. So
That's
one thing that's
awesome.
really awkward about that process is that
Hmm.
the book is a live document that's always changing, right?
Oh,
So every 6 weeks there's a Rust release. So the book can change potentially every 6 weeks. So if you go from the start of my videos to the end of my videos, it's not the same book. Like it's been updated a number of times in the process.
how long did that take you, that whole sort of process to go through the book?
It took roughly, I want to say, close to a year, probably like 3/4 of a year.
Hmm. Wow, that is bold. Like I was watching a video about Mr. Beast and how he like I think he read the dictionary like that, like through and through. And then he did some other things, like he counted to like I don't know what number. He just did a bunch of stuff like that. That's a good way to do it. Like dedicate yourself. And did you find that okay, so you read the book, and
Hmm.
tell me what happened after that. Like how did you continue that? You had your motivation trying to get help your wife, like learn this language. Read the whole book. You people started learning. So maybe talk about your first few projects and what happened afterwards.
So what happened afterwards was that they became a community around my YouTube channel,
Hmm.
and the community, like I felt very like uplifted by being able to help other people learn this thing. Because like, Rust is a great language, but there's not many learning resources for people that are just trying to get into it. So a lot of the focus of me reading the book was me reading it and then explaining it and breaking it down and going through everything. And because I did that, my understanding of it became just like really great, at least in my opinion.
Hmm.
Which then led me to be able to go through and look at other aspects of Rust, like the crates and the packages that are less documented and may have more pitfalls for learners, and then be able to explain that in a way that they understand how to use it. And it kind of just grow from there.
Man, I tell you what, Adelina, I bet you're sort of thinking now, like, Rust. Maybe that could be a thing. Like, that's such a great
100%.
story. So I do want to ask you. Okay, so it feels to me at least that Go has probably had, just in terms of a curve of acceptance, like a little bit of an earlier curve of acceptance in the industry. So to what do you attribute that? Like the fact that it got picked up a little bit earlier maybe, and that it feels like it has more projects behind it, like a bigger community. Any reason why? I mean, any reason why you think something like this could have happened? Maybe it was easier migration from Java, perhaps. I don't know. What do you think?
I think quite honestly, because Google was using it, so and
Mm,
they were maintaining it. They said like, oh, it performs at the scale that we require. So therefore, it kind of like automatically was battle tested, if that
mm,
makes sense.
yeah.
And also they really like made it open source from the beginning, and they really listened to the community and the people that I want to say also that the Go community is wonderful and very
Mm,
accepting of newcomers, and that hasn't changed in the years that I've been a gopher. Oh yeah, and then this is the mascot of the Go community. This is the
very cute.
gopher. The gopher comes in different colors, so I just wanted to show it to people. But
Very
yeah, and
nice.
definitely this was the reason. And the fact that it's a simple language that's quite easy to pick up,
Mm,
um, decrease the learning curve. And they have this tour of Go where you can like see all the different parts of the language, and the Go playground allows you to try out code snippets in the browser. And I think this makes it easy to play around with it, get a feel for it, and then actually make a case for why you should try and use it at whatever project you're trying out.
All right, Marcus, I'm a JavaScript developer.
Mm.
Go is just, it looks weird. Go looks to me like something like that a Java person would switch to. Would you recommend for somebody like me to, maybe, okay, here's the thing. You guys convince me. Like, I'm a JavaScript web developer, full stack kind of person. Why should
Mhm.
I go with Rust? And then maybe why do you think I should go with Go? What do you think, Marcus?
Um, okay. So
Hmm.
there, every language has like the strong points and it has their weak points, right?
Mhm.
And there are plenty of things that you should always use JavaScript for, because that's the domain it controls, at the domain it lives in. But there are some domains that you can do better in other languages, or maybe run
Mhm.
faster, run quicker, or have just less errors in general.
Mhm.
So one of the things I would probably bring up is the security aspect of Rust. Like, it is hard to write a lot of common programming errors in Rust. And given that you're coming from JavaScript, you probably are well aware of like the issue of when you pass in something, you always have to check what it is, like having null values. That's not something you really have to deal with in Rust. So think about that entire aspect of errors just gone. Like, you don't have to deal with it. And your
Hmm.
code is faster.
That does sound good. All right, Adelina, convince me now that yeah, I'm a hardcore JavaScript developer. Go looks. I appreciate the speed. I appreciate. Is there like a lot of jobs? Like, why should I switch to Go? I know that the mascot looks awesome, and that's one of the JavaScript's weakness. I don't think we have a mascot. And I know that Rust also has a cool like little crab dude. I think we failed there. We failed. But tell me about Go. And why should I consider it?
So, well, it depends what you want to do, right? So I echo what Marcus said. Like, it depends what you want to achieve. And Go shines in particular in two aspects, right? So actually, it was it was made for infrastructure management. So for example, you've got Kubernetes, you've got Docker, you've got Prometheus that were written in Go, because it just shines at this kind of infrastructure tooling. And then it's popular for cloud server-side applications. So all the big cloud providers will have support for Go. Um, I would say that it scales a lot better than using a different framework, and it'll just be faster. Of course, like if you're just trying it out as your own little like project, then of course you want to go for the language that you know best, so it's a painless experience. But when it comes to what you're trying to achieve, then you might not have as much success with JavaScript. Oh, and then there's also this thing called Tiny Go, which allows people to write Go for like Raspberry Pis and little microcontrollers, and it's really, really cute what they can do. So shout out to the Tiny Go community as well.
That's cool. I had never heard of that, and also that evidently there is some of the hugest projects, like you mentioned Kubernetes. Did you say Docker
Yeah,
in there as well? That was written in Go? Wow, that's pretty
Prometheus.
impressive, because that's stuff that I use all the time. We do stuff with code spaces, and I know that's kind of like a Docker containerized, application. So that's pretty. I feel like I almost feel too like I'd be making more cash if I was like maybe a Go developer. I don't know how the salaries compare, but it feels like maybe Go more enterprisey, like maybe more longevity. The thing about JavaScript is that you have to learn something new every like week. I was doing this course, and I've been mentioning it all week, that I was doing this course in the history of like full stack development. And while I was doing it, like that quick framework, came out and caught fire. We had like a new version of like Next.js, like a Turbo Pack came out, a new build tool that is gonna, faster than anything else. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like I'm literally having to rewrite the courses I'm, as the week is passing by. And I'm like, by the time this thing releases, like I probably will have to rewrite some of it at least again. So that is, one thing for some of these other languages are maybe a little bit more stable. Okay, so let's talk about, maybe you mentioned your wife, Marcus, but people in school, people that are starting out. I know that a lot of, schools have Java programs. Is there sort of maybe some reasons why somebody might want to take a look at maybe Rust, or maybe Go as a second language, something else that you could pick up in school?
Oh, I see. So if they're looking at it as a secondary language, then I'm all for it. But in terms of schooling, like
Hmm.
my focus, it would be their priorities. If your priority is to learn a language, then you can pick any language you like, and you can, by all means, learn that language. But if your priority is to learn the craft of programming as like the academic form and just in general everything that comes with it, then you're going to want to pick the language that has the most resources, because ultimately it is your knowledge that you apply to a language that makes it useful, right? So
Hmm.
if you don't have the understanding of the craft first, then you can't really do much in the language. And so I would say if it's a secondary language, then yes, but make sure you spend time learning the craft and getting as much resources as you can.
Interesting. That's really good. Okay, Adelina, for you, when do you think it's the right time to learn Go? Is it past school? Is it during school? Is it as maybe you're thinking about a secondary career, or a transition from, maybe like a front end developer to something more enterprisey. When do you think is the right time? If you were starting from scratch?
Yesterday.
Yes. Yes.
No, I'm joking.
Oh man, that is it. You are good. You are good. That's great.
No, so I definitely think that because Go is made to be simple, it is a language that you can learn quite early on in your career. My comment is that like I don't think, because of the lack of like academic level material, I
Hmm.
don't think it's suited for like students.
Hmm.
But once you understand the basics of programming, then of course you can really quickly pick up Go. It is statically typed, so you will have to deal with types and like interfaces and things like that. There's also a little bit of memory, like allocation understanding with slices and pointers. So you will be exposed to quite a few different things. Because it's so used for server-side applications, I will argue that someone transitioning from front end to full stack should consider it. And the way that functions work in Go, I would say, is similar to JavaScript. So maybe
Mhm.
it won't be such a big departure. But at one point, you will be faced with the fact that there are types. So you can declare things as variables, but under the hood, they will be statically typed. And you'll need to understand like what methods are available and stuff like that. But the compiler helps you out.
Mhm.
And I know that in the beginning, if you're coming from a JavaScript background, you're like, what is this compiler? What has it done for me? But actually, the tooling helps you write code. So, yeah, treat it like a new friend, get to know it, and it'll help you write code.
All right. So what do you guys think would be a good first project for somebody who's just getting started? Maybe an old JavaScript developer, maybe like me, who, says, okay, well, yeah, this looks good. I want to try this. What's a good first step, Marcus? What do you think?
Okay. So the first step would be to distinguish like what you're trying to learn, right? If your goal is to trying to learn a language, then the project shouldn't be new because then you're trying to learn two things at once, which could complicate things.
Hmm,
So if you have a project that you are familiar with, that you've written in the language that you are comfortable with, like you already have all the solutions and problems and answers already there, I would say do that project in the other language, because then you're just learning the language.
that's really smart. What about you, Adelina? What would you say is a good? I mean, you got thrown into a project, so I have no idea what the complexity was. But what would be a good project for first project for somebody using Go?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what Marcus said as an excellent answer. I would say, mess around with it when it comes to either building a command line tool. Go really shines with building command line tools, and a
Hmm.
lot, for example, like Qlang is also written, no, Q is also written in Go, not Qlang. Um, and also a command line tool to like maybe make your life easier or whatever, or if you wanted to write a REST API just to
Hmm.
see how to use the HTTP package, and then maybe do something fun there as well with maybe an open source library that you can integrate with.
I love the way
That
you
would
think. I mean, I love command line tools like CLIs. I built them in like Bash, and I hated it because Bash is so weird with the weird like if then weird like reversed if then like it's just crazy. So yeah, I think maybe probably either one would work well for like a CLI tool as a first project. But I like how you think, Adelina, throwing me into, and then REST APIs. That's another thing that we like as web developers have to deal with a lot. So good selling points. Good selling points. We do have some questions. Let's see before I have anything else in here. Well, what about? Do you guys recommend anything besides the languages? I think Marcus kind of alluded to some of this, that you should kind of have some experience before you're writing it. Don't, like know the sort of applications first before you get into the actual language. What else would you learn, or what else would you tell somebody to understand well before going into one of these emerging languages? I'll start with Adelina because it feels like I've picked on Marcus first every time. So,
Yeah, so I did point out some of the things with pointers,
hmm,
and
wow,
point.
pointers.
So
I
Go
didn't
has
like that in school, so
pointers.
I didn't enjoy the
Um,
pointers though. It wasn't fun.
yeah,
But I have to.
unfortunately, there they are.
All right. All right. So you're not telling me I'll
Maybe
go
a little.
anymore. Like I was really excited when you said REST API and command line languages, but okay. So now I'm thinking Rust. I think Rust winning in my past. See, I picked it. I picked it on the poll. So I don't know. You're gonna have to work with me a little bit more, Adelina. So pointers and what
Um,
else?
Pointers and a little bit of understanding about how object oriented programming works and how you can build types, and how you can build. So you can't really build hierarchies in Go, but you
Mm,
can compose them. So the principles of compositions and actually like maybe like solid principles,
mm,
so you can learn how to just like represent the problem with the custom types and functions that you're going to write. So because like when you understand what you're trying to build, then you can actually write the code and explore with how it works. I made this joke with one of my friends. I said the tragic thing about computers is that they only do what you tell them. So if they don't work, it's because you didn't tell them to work. So yeah.
Okay, all of a sudden I'm getting super depressed because the things that I love about JavaScript is the fact that you don't have to worry about type so much. Like there's something about how loose it is that I actually enjoy. So, oh man, save me, Marcus. Is Rust like? Do you have to do like pointers in Rust? Like then you would sell me on Rust immediately. And like, what about is it like super hardly typed like Java or please give me some hope.
I have no hope for you.
Oh
All of those
no.
things remain true in Rust as well. In terms of things that you would have to understand, I think Adelina put this best: is the compiler is your friend. It will take you out to coffee dates. It will walk you through getting your code from it doesn't work, it's a trash fire, to it's golden goose that lays eggs. But in terms of like general knowledge, it's
Hmm.
I say that you should get a basic CS understanding of, like, say, maybe data structures and algorithms, maybe pointers and stuff like that, so that when you read it in the Rust book, it is not your first time hearing these
Hmm.
terms. Because if
Hmm.
it's your first time hearing these terms, then that's very discouraging. Because that book is not necessarily meant to teach you those terms and all the background around it. It's meant to teach you a language. So it's not going to cover them in the same type of depth as something else will. So.
All right. It sounds like either of those are some languages that I might want to play around with, but I'm gonna have to go back to classes as well. That is really painful for me.
Oh,
Like,
well, no,
A
no.
quick
what?
note.
Say, I'm sorry. You have something to say there, Marcus?
Oh, it's always composition over inheritance. I'm just saying that out loud for
Mhm.
both of us. Isn't that right, Adelina?
Yeah. There's
Okay,
no
well,
inheritance.
I think I'll stick around with my JavaScript for a while. I may play still, yeah, maybe I'll give it a shot one day and just try it out and see how well it does. So let's
I
go
wanted to
to.
say one
Oh,
quick thing.
all right, you're gonna
Sorry.
make me feel better. Please, if you can,
I'm
if you
gonna
can help
say,
me
like,
here.
you know how both Go and Rust are statically typed? Well, it's because it's been proven to allow people to write more scalable software. So scalable in terms of like lines of code, but also teams. So like
Hmm.
newcomers have basically the compiler to map out what the code is supposed to do, and yeah, so it's easier to pick it up and scale it. So I think it's a worthwhile investment to learn a statically typed language, even if it's not Go, even though that will hurt my feelings. I'm joking.
Well, I think that we should maybe plan some sort of course, remedial object orientedness for Java developers using Go and Rust or something.
That's actually
Because
a section in the book.
oh, awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good to know. Maybe that's why so many JavaScript developers are sort of checking out Rust. All right. I have some work to do on myself. I feel like I need to embrace object orientedness and pointers. I don't know if I could ever do that, Adeline. I'm sorry. Like I never liked them. I like the functional nature of JavaScript, but I'm willing to try things out. So there's maybe hope for me. I'll keep you guys posted. CLI sounds, I mean, if it's better than not Perl, if it's better than Bash, then I'm willing to give it a shot in one of these languages. So maybe there's some good hope there. All right, let's go to Q&A. We do have a few questions in the chat, so this will be good. Let's see. We have Steven is saying that Go errors are much better than Java unchecked exceptions. Would you agree to that, Adelina?
Yeah, so this was the explicit error handling that I was alluding to, or no,
Mm,
I've actually talked about them. So because you have to think about so you return the error up the stack, and then you have to handle it. You can either handle it by like reacting to it or even discarding it. So you don't have to do something constructive with it. But the fact that you have to think about it and make a decision about it makes you sure that you'll know all the paths that your code is going to go on. So that's I think it's quite cool. Some people argue that it's more verbal. It makes the code more verbose. But again, Go was designed for simple use cases and wasn't designed for like these humongous applications. So yeah, it's
Cool, good to know. Okay,
maybe
so
simplifying.
somebody asked this, but then somebody immediately answered it. So the question was, is Go the same as Golang? And Steven said, yes, it is. And then they said, oh,
Yes.
great. So that's good. Good to know. And so he also said it's often used because the word Go is too common for Google searches. Yeah, I know. Like that. Why did you Rust? Like why did they have to name it? You really have to put like Rust programming language. I mean, I get that the name is sort of cool, but I get a bunch of other results whenever like why did Google name their new language like Carbon? That's the most common thing you could type on Google search. So you really have to add a few. I guess I'll live. All right, let's see. We have a couple more. So somebody says, what would you recommend? And this wasn't me. What would be the best way to learn object-oriented programming? I would add that doesn't include reading a whole manual from cover to cover, like Marcus did. Something a little quicker for me. What would you guys recommend?
Oh, may I go first?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
go for it.
Okay. So if I were to recommend a way of learning object-oriented programming, I would say use a language that is mostly dedicated to object-oriented programming, like Python, and
Mm,
then start reading a lot of their like data structures and algorithms books and other books that tell you how to build applications, because all of those applications to a certain extent are going to be using your objects and then using like the hierarchy of how like inheritance works, which will go through all of these slews, the pitfalls and the great things about object oriented code.
that's really good. Anything you want to add there, Adelina? Or are you good? I think that's probably a good answer.
Yeah, it was a pretty good answer. Like, just you're gonna run into composition and reusing code and stuff like that when you're gonna build a project, anyways. And I would say that like everyone runs into these things regardless of what language you're writing. It's just that some
Mm.
make it more obvious than others. So yeah,
All
you
right.
can't
So
run away from art. Yeah.
I'm trying to run away, but it's not working with you guys. All right. Somebody says, and I'm gonna do the Picard now. Pointers is one of the best things in Go. I can't do this. But I guess you guys agree with that. And then somebody else. I don't know what this means. There's no legitimate need for implementation inheritance. Who is he talking to?
Probably me.
Oh.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that Go doesn't have inheritance, but it has composition with interfaces.
Hmm.
By when we talk about inheritance, like in Java, where you can have like a super class that you like inherit from, that doesn't exist. Like, and then interfaces allow you to reuse behavior and reuse methods in a much easier way than inheritance.
Hmm.
Yeah, and they're compiler
Interesting.
enforced, they're faster. So yeah, I would definitely agree with the point there that there's no need for inheritance in Go.
Super interesting.
Uh,
Okay, so yeah, what would you say, Marcus? Anything else?
so I agree. So one of the things that like I think about when we talk about object-oriented programming, I think we a lot of times we're talking about the mind share that object-oriented programming has on the existing populace. Like they think of how they solve their problems via object and object-oriented programming. And anything you can do in object-oriented programming, you can do in composition. And Rust is the same way as Go. We use composition all the time. You can't do like inheritance. That's not a thing.
Hmm.
Um, but because we're talking to a group of people that typically solve their problems in object oriented programming, we have to sort of ease them into composition at times. And it's just the
Interesting.
world we live in.
All right, so somebody did say that they feel like these two languages are dependent, or knowing these are dependent on knowing other languages. Could you, I mean, I think Marcus, you mentioned that you wouldn't recommend somebody maybe start with Rust. I don't know if that's what you think also, Adelina, but do you feel like you really wouldn't, this is not you wouldn't have somebody learn any of these first? that they are dependent on prior knowledge. Oops, I'm sorry. That yeah, these two languages are depending on knowing other languages. What do you guys think about that?
I wouldn't say so.
Hmm.
So it's not that you have to know Java in order to then learn. Like you can still, what we did say is what my personal viewpoint was that you should know a little bit about like the fundamentals of computing before you start. Um, because there's just the emerging languages don't have the amount of documentation that the more legacy languages have.
Hmm.
But I definitely think you can start with Go and people in the community will help you.
Yeah, Stephen
I
agrees
was,
as well that you can
Mhm.
it can be a good starting language. That's interesting. Well, somebody is rebelling against this whole conversation, saying that they're glad they're glad they're just learning Python. So awesome! I guess that's another conversation. Maybe another show can be like the battle of like old versus new, Python versus Rust, or Python
I
versus
was
Java. What
gonna
do you have to
say
say?
Python is a great place to transition from Python to Go. So
There
like
you
there's your second language sorted.
That's great. Let's see. Oh, I'll take one more question. Whoa. Okay. There's actually a couple of really good questions here, so I'm going to keep going.
Ooh.
Are there any design patterns that are really suitable for Go and Rust, respectively? Very interesting question.
Oh,
So, yeah,
may
yeah.
I go
Go
first for
ahead.
this one?
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so one of the things that a lot of emerging languages do well is that they try to make asynchronous programming and concurrent programming very simple to do. So both Go and Rust have channels and a way of communicating between, let's say, asynchronous threads and just talking to each other in a way that is easy to write because the compiler will help you, and at the same time enjoyable to like it'll make all your code faster, and it takes advantage of today's architecture and world where we're making a lot of outbound requests and we don't want to do nothing while we're waiting for those outbound requests to come back. Like we get to
Hmm.
utilize that extra time and space to do something else, and these languages do it very well.
Hmm. Any thoughts about that, Adelina?
Yeah, definitely big fan of channels and coroutines, and making things asynchronous.
Hmm.
I would say that there are quite a few patterns that I don't think work well. For example, you've got like some the builder patterns or the like, different constructor patterns that are like more convoluted that just wouldn't work in Go. But I definitely think like composition and the solid principles work really well.
Wow. Diego says that he started with C and then Go is better. Yeah, I mean, like, that is a big jump. It seems
Readability.
like, yeah. What about, have you guys heard about this language called Zig at all? I read about it a little bit. I don't know much about it. What's the deal? Do you have some experience with it, Marcus?
I don't have experience with it, but I have friends that have talked about it to me. From my understanding, it is a language attempt to sort of replace C,
Hmm.
in that sort of scope and realm. Like everything that C can do, Zig can do, from my understanding. And it is another one of the emerging languages. It's not as popular as Go and Rust as of right now, but th- nobody knows the future. It could be.
Yes, I guess Google's trying to do sort of the same thing with Carbon. Like, I guess you see these languages kind of appear in order to maybe not fix something with the old languages, but maybe have a certain focus on different things that are really great, that are newer thoughts. Even though some of the original ideas are fantastic, some people still swear by like Lisp, for example. I don't know what that's about, but yeah, I mean, it's good to see new things, and I like how older languages too tend to sort of adjust to the new things. All right, that's enough super nerdy programming things. Let's go to something fun that I happen to call random access. So these are questions that don't have a right or wrong answer. They're just meant to be a lot of fun because I am a sci-fi nerd. I usually have some sci-fi aspect to it, and I always forget what the heck the questions were by the time I get to this part. So this will be interesting for me as well. All right, so let's go to question one. Are you guys ready?
This is the part I'm most nervous for.
You should be. This is the tough part because you don't know. I didn't let you know what I was gonna. Actually, a lot of the interviews are pretty they go in flux. So even though I told you some of the topics, some of the answers are just come from your other answers. All right, let's go to question one. Question one. In the classic film Close Encounters of the Third Kind, a new language based on music is presented to aliens as a form of communication. And this is a 5 note sequence that famously John Williams, the guy who wrote like all the great music for like Jaws, Star Wars, like super great musicians, he created a 5 note sequence. The director told him it needs to be only 5 notes. I don't want it to be a tune, but I want it to be recognizable enough. Now, if you had first contact with aliens and you had to introduce them to some type of music, which genre would you pick? And I really tried to look for some like not well known genres to kind of throw you guys off. So since Adelina was so nervous about this, I'm going to go with her first. Adelina, tell me and it doesn't have to be one of these. Maybe you haven't heard William Shatner covers, a definite triumph of humanity. But yeah, what would you say?
First off, I watched The Big Bang Theory, so I know who
Oh.
William Shatner is. So
That's
there
so
you
funny
go
that
on
that's how
that.
you know that's how you actually know him, like from a different show. That's funny. Okay, so
I'll probably go for reggaeton just because,
very good.
we want to give something trendy to the aliens. We want to, put
Well,
our best foot forward.
so a couple of these reggaeton and bachata. I'm a Latin person, so that totally came from me, and I'm very impressed. Like that, maybe I will write that command line thing and go. I don't know. What do you say? What do you say, Marcus? What's your take here?
I have to go with hip hop,
All
mainly
right,
because in terms of hip hop, each country, a lot of countries where hip hop is popular, they all do it
hmm,
differently.
that's right.
And I was in China for I think the second year of Hip Hop of China, so I got to watch it from that aspect as well. And I think there's enough variety there that we just keep them entertained.
That's great. Yeah, and I think like the way that when I was doing this question, the way that I thought about it is that I would have to sort of like get a feel for what the aliens were into, like communicate with them a little bit, and then okay, these people would really go for like some K-pop. K-pop would be like the thing. Although my ultimate answer was who I don't know how to pronounce this properly, but Humi, because that is Mongolian throat singing. And I figured that it
Oh
would be kind of
yeah.
cool to like show them something that was purely human, whereas like all this other music requires some instruments. Like Kumi could just be done with somebody's, body. So I think that that might be a good way to go. Although I put pirate metal here because Morton, my friend, who also does courses, he's a huge metal fan. So I thought I would put that in there. Good answers. Good. Way to go. See, this isn't that as bad as you thought, Adelina. Let's go to question number two. And again, I've forgotten what I put in here. All right. In the classic play Pygmalion, a speech therapist makes a bet that by changing the accent of a flower girl, a Cockney flower girl, he could make her pass for British royalty. Which programming languages make developers feel like they're the fanciest? The options here: any flavor of C, Lisp, Erlang, COBOL, or Perl. Hmm. What do you guys say to this one? And obviously, I think any other answers would work here as well.
To
Mhm.
make programmers think that they're the
Yeah, like
fanciest.
like have you ever
Uh,
met somebody that goes, "Oh, like I think like I was talking about Lisp, like Lisp people think that they are like the programming royalty because so many things are based off of it." So what would you say?
I might have to go with C just because there's so many things written in it.
Yeah.
Because they have access to our historical payload of programming, and sometimes people assume that they have read the historical payload of programming as well when they just know the language. It's
Hmm.
so I'm
Good
gonna have to go
answer.
with C.
All right. Adelina, what do you say?
Good
You're
one.
you're Erlang
Oh,
enthusiast?
yeah, I was. How did you know? I was gonna go for Erlang because it's like pure functional, so
Yeah,
that's like,
yeah.
real fancy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So my friend, who I'm talking with tomorrow, Simon Saint Laurent, actually wrote a book on Erlang, and he is a huge fan. So I put that in here in honor of him as well. And I was just listening to somebody yesterday on the Lex Friedman podcast talk about Lisp. It's like, oh, the right language to use is Lisp. Maybe Python, if you if you have to, maybe Python would be good enough because it kind of has like Lisp concepts. But this is actually where this question came from. All right. So last question. And again, I don't remember. Oh, Uhura from Star Trek is known to have learned 37 Earth languages. How many languages do you think programmers should learn in their lifetime? So here the options are only one, but super well, at least two, 2 to 5, more than 5. And the last answer is a few, and then really just focus on other skills. What do you guys think? I'll go with Adelina this time.
Yeah, definitely at least two. Depends like how the technology is moving, right? So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like so far we've kind of gone with two because like that's just how we've had the legacy languages that have been moved that have had the monopoly for quite a while, and now we have the emerging languages.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what's going to happen in the future. Like
Hmm.
maybe in my life I might have to like learn more.
Hmm.
So yeah, I'd say at least two, with an asterisk of depending how the
Oh,
situation evolves.
very good. What would you say, Marcus?
I'm gonna go with answer three, which is at least 2 to 5 languages.
Hmm.
I'm not saying all these languages have to be your primary language, but from my experience, anytime you learn a new language, you get to think about programming in a different way. So
Hmm.
let's say when I went from Python and I started learning Go, like one of the things I care about Go a lot is like table testing, and now I do that in every language I write in because that is a
Hmm.
very good practice. And then when I started doing Rust, what I started focusing on is ownership and borrowing, like who owns this thing and who should have access to it. And then when I bring that knowledge to other languages, I just become ultimately a better programmer in that other language. So like 2 to 5, just so you can be introduced to these new concepts, a different way of thinking about programming.
Man, that is a fantastic answer. I don't think I could have put it any better than that. And I do relate like knowing English and Spanish, like understanding the structure of those two different languages. Actually, there's no structure in English. What am I talking about? Like Spanish is like the most structured language, I think. It has like definite rules that you have to follow. Like if you can read it, you can know how to pronounce it. That's one of the big things. And English is like JavaScript, very chaotic, but it's still a lot of fun. So great answer. Thank you guys for playing. See, hopefully it wasn't as bad. I love that Adelina has like a special clap that she does. So you know you did well if you get the Adelina clap. Very, very nicely done. So much fun to do stuff with you. So last off, just wanted to mention that we do have a ton of courses that we did specifically using code spaces on everything like SQL, Python, Go, and lots of other languages, Bash script in there for my CLI that I wrote, I guess. And there's lots of other stuff, so you guys should go check that out at this URL. And I did want to say that somebody did mention that we should definitely teach the aliens bluegrass. Interesting. Apparently, Diego says that I should see Portuguese. Evidently, it's even got more rules maybe than Spanish. So I think that that's the interesting thing. Learning maybe a new language will teach you. I love what Marcus said. Will teach you a lot of to learn sort of new, not just algorithms, but approaches, which is pretty awesome. All right, so Adelina, you did a course on with code spaces called Level Up Go, of course. Can you talk a little bit about how it was using just code spaces itself?
It was really cool. It made, first of all, I want to give a huge shout out to everyone working at LinkedIn, because, they helped me create my very first content.
Hmm.
Well, I'd written stuff, but never like video and stuff like that. So like it was completely new to me, and the instructors at LinkedIn, they really helped me out. But yeah, it was much easier to record with code spaces and work with code spaces. It's really it just works. Very rarely did I have issues with like the containers not starting up or anything like that. So give it a definitely, everyone give it a go. It's free, and it'll just make your life loads easier.
That's great. So can I have a clap for the people that helped you at LinkedIn, please? That's your that's awesome. That's awesome. All right, Marcus, you also you although you don't have a course that's just out with Codespaces, I know that you have been working on one and it should be out, at some point in the near future. So tell me a little bit about how it was actually using something like Rust, which which you don't think about when talking about Codespaces, but what was the experience with Codespaces like?
The experience with code spaces, at least at the very beginning, was that once you have to get Rust into the container, and I think in the code spaces documentation, I don't think Rust is a first class citizen, so you have to install it. Like it's not just there.
Hmm.
But out after you get past that learning curve of getting code spaces up and running, then everything is more or less fine because you're just using VS Code as your editor, so it's
Hmm.
a familiar environment.
That's cool. All right, don't forget to follow all of the guests today, and there's all their LinkedIn profile URLs. So cool to have you guys here. Also, there's the mascot. I love that. I'm gonna have to find a crab, a little crab, cute crab for Marcus, and I don't know what I'm gonna do for JavaScript. I don't know. All right, so don't forget you can check all the sessions for GitHub Universe at this URL. And also that tomorrow I am talking to Simon and Morton about the future of the web. What does that look like? That should be pretty fun. Thank you again so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for the questions. And I will see everyone again tomorrow, and hopefully I will see you all around in future episodes. Talk to you later.